So my faller from this list is somebody that I just was surprised was even ended up in this spot at the number 13, depending on your scoring, and that is Melvin Gordon. Now, there are multiple factors into why I think Melvin Gordon of the Denver Broncos is going to be somebody who falls out of the top 15 this year. One of them being is that he got a lot of volume last year, but he's not producing at a high level. And especially when you just watch him play, like he obviously doesn't look the same in his prime San Diego years, but he had a decent year. He played 15 games, and he had 250 carries, but only 986 yards rushing, 9 touchdowns. And I think the touchdowns is where his primary fantasy production came from. Like, I think we talk about touchdowns all the time, right? That they're fluky. He could easily had 4 touchdowns this year. And where would that would have put him way lower on this list. That probably would have knocked him out of the top 15. So one, I don't think he's going to be as productive or get as much opportunity. Obviously, they drafted Javonte Williams. I was listening to somebody else talk about Javonte Williams just for like redraft purposes, right? And saying, oh, he's not going to be fantasy relevant this year. I'm like, I think that's crazy to say. I think Javonte Williams is definitely going to be fantasy relevant this year. There's no more Phillip Lindsay. They added Mike Boone and they still have Royce Freeman. Those guys aren't going to threaten Melvin Gordon or Javonte Williams, in my opinion. Also, if Melvin Gordon misses time due to his potential suspension for the DUI situation, that is going to lower his overall numbers. But also, what if Javonte Williams kills it in those games that he misses? And all of a sudden, obviously they're not going to not use Melvin Gordon. They will, but maybe it's a lot closer than we thought at the beginning of the season because Javonte Williams has a great week 1. So you have a rookie running back who some NFL scouts were saying is the best running back in this class, in their opinion, in Javonte Williams. The Denver Broncos traded up for him. It's the new NFL where rookies are going to get opportunities right away. So Melvin Gordon has this guy breathing down his neck. He's not as productive even when he was in the lead role. And I just think, I thought it was going to be last year where he just became kind of completely irrelevant. But I don't think he's going to be completely irrelevant, but I don't think Melvin Gordon is sniffing the top 15 this year.
Yeah, that's not a bad pick. And then, to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying, Javonte Williams, I don't know who that source was or where you heard that from. I think he's going to be very much in the game plan this season. But also, you brought up the fact that, he did get in trouble in the offseason. He has that DUI on his record now. I just wanted to look it up to make sure. But, yeah, he is still susceptible to facing discipline from the NFL for that reason. And that could be a 1 or 2 game suspension. And so when you talk about that, a lot of this offseason news that we've been hearing about is that Javonte Williams is a guy that's going to win you your fantasy playoffs. He's going to be ready and primed to be a lead back second half of the season. But you're totally right. If for some reason Melvin Gordon faces a possible suspension and he's out for 1 or 2 games and Javonte Williams just comes in and lights up the world, by the way, the Broncos are in discussion for Deshaun Watson now, so that's just coming out of left field. But, all that aside, hypothetically speaking, if that happens to Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams comes in, you're not talking about him being a guy that's, taking the reins week 8 onward. He's a guy that's a beast from the start of the season. Therefore, how likely are you to give the reins back to a guy like Melvin Gordon, who is on the last year of his contract? That was my first impression when I saw that the Denver Broncos drafted a guy like Javonte Williams was, it makes perfect sense. They're not going to want to pay Melvin Gordon next year. Most teams, they like to run that guy into the ground. They like to get the most out of him because they know that wherever he goes next year, it's not going to be them. But given all of these different scenarios that could play out, it's very likely that Javonte Williams cements himself early in the season, but it's just as likely that he cements himself later in the season. For all of those reasons that you just mentioned, Jacob, that's a perfectly valid way of saying and justifying that Melvin Gordon is going to fall out of the top 15 this 2021 season. So it's not a bad pick, man. I like it. I dig it.
And I think it's mostly because of the Sermon draft capital, or not Sermon, excuse me, Javonte Williams draft capital. And because if they didn't draft a running back and it was just Melvin Gordon there with Mike Boone and Royce Freeman, then I would kind of be saying the opposite, because he's just going to get so much volume. But so to me, the biggest factor is Javonte Williams.